Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video we're back talking about Survivor 50. Finally making a video that will make use of how knee-deep into the Survivor 50 rumor mill I was. Obviously a lot of talk around Survivor 50 is how mid the cast is and how much better it could be, where in this video I'll be talking about the people that potentially could have been on the cast, the people that were rumored to have been called for Survivor 50, where I'll be talking about every season from beginning to end, talking about the people that were rumored from each of those seasons. Now, obviously, to clarify, this is not every single person that got called. We simply do not know that at this point. This is simply just the people that were said to have been called by reliable sources. And with that, obviously, credit to Redmond for a lot of this information. Survivors Unite, a reliable Survivor Suck source, the one that actually leaked the entire cast to begin with. Obviously, I'll mention the players that confirmed themselves that they were called, and also a couple other people mentioned by a more unreliable source, the one that did have accurate information at a point, though obviously, again, I'll preface that when we get to it. Also, while we're at it, I might as well just talk about the people that confirmed that they were not called as well, because why not? On my list of calls, I do have 99 people at this current point. Again, this is at the beginning of June of 2025. Again, immediately after the cast came out. Obviously, as time goes on, I assume we're going to get more information. Probably at this point, most of it's coming from the alumni themselves, but obviously I'm going to assume we're going to get more names along the way. As well, obviously 99 people is quite a bit. I do suspect that they called at least like 120, 150 players at this point. Possibly more. Like we know Jeff had it down to around 200 at a point, so again, you never know. But also mention the fact that, again, this is a video simply about the people that were called. This is not my future history of the rumor mill video I've talked about in the past, where again, I run through the overall like timeline of how all this information was trickled out and who we thought were on the cast at specific points. Again, this is just specifically talking about the people themselves and the people that were actually called, where again, that video obviously included a lot of people that we speculated were called, but turned out they weren't. But with that, let's start running through the seasons from beginning to end. Again, we'll also be running through them in boot order. Obviously starting it off with Survivor Borneo, which from Survivor Borneo, we do have 5 people that we've heard got called, excluding some pretty big names, really all the Toggy 4, which obviously, again, rest in peace, Rudy. But again, no reliable source talked about Richard Hatch being called, Kelly Wigglesworth, Sue Hawk. But the first person that we know was called was someone that I wish we saw in the season. It was Greg Buis. And again, Greg is someone that was confirmed to be called. We don't exactly know what happened with him, where Survivors Unite did claim that he was cut, but Redmond never able to clarify if that was the case or not, to where, again, if he was cut, that is pretty insane. I mean, he is someone that production's been wanting back for a while, and for him to be cut for Survivor 50 is kind of bizarre, though considering all the other cuts around him, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. Obviously, we know Jenna Lewis was called, as she's on the season. And again, it wasn't shocking that Jenna Lewis was called, considering the fact that she was in the running for 40, so again, makes sense here. And then we move on to Jervis, who is someone that we know was cut along the way. Someone that, again, I was actually expecting to be on the cast at a point, especially when, again, I thought they were going to hit diversity mandate, which kind of clearly didn't. But again, Jervis is someone that was a big name at the time. Didn't give us the most in Blood vs. Water, to where him being cut just on paper makes sense, though. There was a point where I thought he would be on. Also, we know they called Colleen. Now, obviously, she declined. So, again, it's not like we really had a chance of her being on the season. But, again, we know they at least reached out to her. And the final person is a bit shocking. This is a person that has only been mentioned by Survivors Unite. Though, again, Survivors Unite is typically reliable with old school seasons. And that person is Sean Caniff, which really threw me off guard. As this is a person that didn't even come up until after the cast was leaked, to where, again, he really just was nowhere in the rumor mill until just all of a sudden it was announced that he got called, which, again, I don't know what happened with him. I don't know if he declined. I don't know if he just got cut very early on, considering, again, we just never heard about him. But, again, interesting that they did reach out to Sean at least. Now moving on to Australian Outback, where we know 4 people were called from this season. Now, that does not include either of the winners from this season. Tina Wesson is someone that we just simply never heard about getting called or not. We just simply do not know. All Survivors Unite has openly said that Amber was not called, which again was a tad surprising. And we know that like Nick Brown has said that he was not called, which to be fair, are they really calling back Nick Brown? But considering he has a much more prominent career nowadays, I thought there was maybe a chance, but then he confirmed himself that he was not. So down to the people that were called. First up is Alicia. And Alicia's someone that for a while talked about never wanting to play Survivor again. Yeah, again, she was included in the names of people that entered the process, aka like at least said yes to the availability call. However, Survivors Unite eventually implied that she dropped out. Again, it's not 100% sure exactly what happened with her, though, again, ultimately, I would have been a little surprised to see her make the final cut anyway. Also, obviously, the big name everyone's talking about, Jerry Manthe, did get cut. That is, again, obviously confirmed by almost every source at this point. Again, a pretty shocking cut there. The one that also didn't even seem that close to making it on, where supposedly she even do medical, which obviously the people that were more in contention did do medical, to where, again, not a great sign for Jerry Manthe there, where obviously she didn't make it on. Also, we got to talk about Elizabeth Hasselback, who is someone that was in the room for a while, and then all of a sudden she posts this video saying, I'm not doing that, about Survivor 50. However, again, it is confirmed that she was reached out to, and likely did say yes initially, where again, there were rumors floating around that she was offered more money than the big four from Survivor Winners at War, which again, I don't know how much money they offered her, but either way, she still dropped out eventually. Now, mind you, I don't think she dropped out as late as what we learned she dropped out at, which was about a week before the cast came out. It seems like she probably dropped out a decent chunk before that. But again, Elizabeth Hasselbeck was definitely someone in contention at a point, though obviously eventually dropped out of it. And obviously, the last person mentioned is the person that's on the season itself. You got Colby Donaldson, which I was questioning if he would be called based around his like friction with Jeff more recently, but ultimately, again, not shocking that he ultimately ended up being in contention. Next up from Africa, and we only have 2 people from Africa that supposedly got called, though even that is a bit disputed, where, again, we got no word of someone like Ethan. T-Bird is someone that confirmed that she didn't get called, to where, again, there were the 2 people that supposedly were called, again, adding in the supposedly. First up, we got Kelly Goldsmith, and Kelly Goldsmith has been confirmed by Survivors Unite. Also, Redmond has said that she's a rumored call. Again, it does seem like Kelly Goldsmith is definitely someone that was in the running. To where, again, I am inclined to think that Kelly Goldsmith is someone that was called. We know she was called for previous seasons, like Second Chance, Blood vs. Water. Obviously, she was going to be on the original All-Stars. Again, Kelly Goldsmith is someone that, again, I would not be that shocked if this is true, to where ultimately it makes a lot of sense. The other name is a bit more questionable, because this is one that has been disputed in the time since, though both Redmond and Survivors Unite have heard his name, and that person is Lex. Where Survivors Unite seems to be very confident Lex was called. Redmond has Lex in his rumored calls list. But Fair Play, obviously someone that maybe not the most reliable source, but again, someone that is very, very close to Lex, and again, I don't see a reason why he would lie, has said that Lex was not called. So again, there's a bit of disputed info here on whether or not Lex was in the running at a point. That being said, I mean, even if he was, didn't seem like he was particularly close to making it onto the cast anyway. But again, someone that, again, was in the room mill to have been called, but again, not necessarily a guarantee that he actually was. Next, I'm moving on to Marquesas, where we have 4 names from Marquesas, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. Not even the names that you would expect. Where, again, there was no mention of Vesepia along the way. We simply do not know. I am personally inclined to think that Vesepia at least got a call based on how Jeff was talking about her as an underrated winner, but ultimately, again, never came up in the rumor mill. The people that were called, though, obviously Boston Rob. I mean, again, that was never a question, and he did decline. Again, he seems to be over being on Survivor as a player. He did say he wants to be involved not as a player, which we'll see if that plays out. Also, one of the big shockers to me, someone that, again, we heard about very late into the process of someone that was at least called, again, coming from Survivors Unite, that person is John Carroll, which, if that's the case, again, I'm pretty happy for John Carroll. And John Carroll is someone that's been begging to come back on the show for years, led a campaign alongside a certain other person we'll be talking about during Second Chance to come back. Again, if he at least got a call here, again, this is better than what I've heard about him before. I never really heard about him getting a call before this. So again, maybe it's a good sign for Second Chance 2 or something. Probably not, though, but still. But again, John Carroll getting called is, again, a pleasant surprise here. Also, again, a big name we got to talk about, Sean Rector. And again, so disappointed that Sean Rector did not make the cut by the end. I was really confident he would. Again, I felt like he was like the type of name that they would want in a post-diversity mandate world, which, again, I guess is sadly gone now. But again, Sean was literally like the first name that we had rumored out there, where, again, it really felt like this was his shot, and obviously he ends up getting cut by the end at the same time as Jerry, which, again, definitely very disappointed that all happened. And the last name from our case we're going to be talking about is Nalia. And Nalia's another one, like John Carroll, again, has been begging to come on the show for years, led a campaign during Second Chance to get on the show. However, again, I never really heard about Nalia being in the running for any of the more recent returning seasons, and then all of a sudden she's in the running for 50. In a spot where, again, there were rumors about how she was the alternate to Elizabeth and that she eventually dropped out. She didn't want to be waiting, which, again, she has now confirmed herself that that is not true, but it does seem like she was called. Again, both Redmond and Survivors Unite have had her on their list of calls, to where, again, I do feel like Nalia is someone that likely was called, which is at least progress for her potential chances of coming back down the road. Next, we move on to Thailand, and I have not heard a single person from Thailand being in the running. Survivors Unite themselves have said that no one from Thailand was called. No other sources talked about anyone from Survivor Thailand, to where, again, I'm inclined to think no one from Survivor Thailand was called here. I think the best chance would have been someone like Xian, but even then, it doesn't seem particularly likely. Next, I'm moving on to the Amazon, where we got 3 people that were supposedly called from the Amazon. Though, again, another spot where it is implied that Jenna Maraska was not one of those people. Again, both Redmond and Survivors Unite both said that they have not heard her name, to where, again, it doesn't seem like Jenna Maraska was called. But the 3 people that were, first up, surprisingly, Christy Smith, which was a little random, where, again, we heard initially that it was just 3 people that got called. And I think from a superfan perspective, I think first instinct is to go someone like Dina as that third, but it was Christy Smith. And again, not particularly shocking considering they literally just gave her a flashback during 48, but again, another one that we just don't know what really happened with her. She's just someone that was brought by Survivors Unite as someone that got called. We don't know if she declined or what exactly happened with her, but again, she's at least rumored to have been called here. Same thing goes with Heidi, which is backed up a bit more here. Again, Survivors Unite has said that she was called. Redmond has said that she was called. Now, again, I don't know if she turned it down. Again, she has not been particularly excited to be playing Survivor again. So, I'm not really expecting her to have said yes, but she is somebody that was supposedly called at some point, but ultimately, again, I don't know if she'd have cut anyway. And obviously the big name from Amazon we got to talk about, Rob Cesternino, who again confirmed himself, was called, got cut, which obviously a lot of the online fan base has been very upset over. Again, I would love to see Rob Cesternino back, though also I do get they cut him. I mean, like, sadly, the truth is that most of the casual fan base just simply does not know who he is. And that seems to be who they were catering towards with the old school names here, to where, even though it's very disappointing, I do personally get the Rob Cesternino cut by the end. Next up, moving on to Pearl Islands, where we have 4 people rumored to have been called here. Again, another one, though, where there's some disputes here. Now, Andrew Savage has confirmed himself that he was not called for this season, in a spot where, well, I wouldn't necessarily hate a return from him. It does seem like his time's probably passed. But again, the people that were called, supposedly, first up we got Rupert, and Rupert's someone that, again, was in the rumor mill, though never really heard much of an update from him. We simply just do not know what happened to him. It is pretty shocking that they would cut Rupert if he was available to play, considering the fact that, again, like, I've never heard of CBS cutting Rupert for anything in the past. It feels like they bring him back at every single opportunity. To where, again, I don't know what Rupert's health is. I don't know if there were other factors in play, but again, it does seem like Rupert did get cut at some point along the way. Also, another name that was brought up by Survivors Unite that got called that, again, was a pleasant surprise. We got Burton. And again, Burton is somebody that I wouldn't be opposed to seeing back. I never really thought it would be a true possibility of him being back. But again, he supposedly was called. Mind you, again, this is simply a name from Survivors Unite. No other sources really said this. But again, Survivors Unite is usually a reputable source when it comes to old school names, to where, again, Burton being the running is interesting. Though with that, we then get to a name Survivors Unite brought up that is being disputed, and that name is Johnny Fairplay. Where again, Survivors Unite has said that Johnny Fairplay was called. Johnny Fairplay himself has said that he was not called. Which, again, while Johnny Fairplay is not a particularly reliable source, he doesn't really have a reason to lie. Like, I don't know why he would be lying about not being called. Instead, you would think it would be the opposite. Especially in a spot where, again, we know he was called for Survivor 40, to where, again, you would think that he would be called for 50, but again, he at least claims that he wasn't. And again, also not claiming that Survivors Unite is lying either. Again, maybe they just have some sources that are telling them some wonky information, but especially when it comes to this information that, again, is more so just like, hey, this person got called, more so than this person's like genuinely in the running and potentially on the season. Again, it feels like that would be something that would be fact checked a bit more, while this is probably something that they just heard in passing. So again, inclined to think Fairplay actually wasn't called, but again, at least there is a source that is saying that he was. And last person to mention here from Pearl Islands, we do got Sandra, who we don't really know what happened with Sandra. Again, Survivors Unite did claim that certain winners were called. Sandra was on that list, though the way they phrased it is that they never entered the process, which, again, I don't know what that really means. With Sandra in particular, if she did say yes, but they just felt like they didn't want to go with these legends or what. But again, Sandra was someone that supposedly was contacted, but nothing really went from there. Nice to move on to Vanuatu, where sadly no name for Vanuatu was rumored the entire time. We know Eliza has confirmed herself that she was not called. I would have personally expected someone like Twyla to have been called, considering she was called for Survivor 40. However, again, her name never came up either. And again, it just seems like Vanuatu, sadly, is just a season that probably got shafted in this process, which is probably a similar thing with a couple other seasons we'll be talking about down the road. But again, just no one was really ever mentioned from Survivor Vanuatu. Next, moving on to Survivor Palau, where we only have one confirmed call from Survivor Palau. Now, I would not be shocked if someone like Ian was called, considering he's been called in the past. But again, there was no rumblings of this. The only person to have firmly been called is obviously the person on the season, Stephanie LaGrossa. Again, just kind of obvious she would at least be contacted, especially if they were going for bigger names. Again, Stephanie being in the running here, not particularly shocking. And with that, we then move on to Guatemala, where we never had any word of any newbie Guatemala names, where obviously Stephanie was on Guatemala, but again, she's not a newbie from it. And outside that, again, never heard any other name outside that. Survivors Unite did mention someone from Guatemala getting called, though I'm inclined to think they were probably just talking about Stephanie, especially considering they later dumped all the names they heard got called, and there was no newbie from Guatemala in there, to where, again, I would not be particularly shocked if someone like a Rafe may have been on their radars at a point, but realistically, again, not particularly shocking. That newbie from Guatemala was never really in the running. And with that, we then move on to Survivor Panama, where we have two names that we know were called. One name that Survivors Unite claimed was not called, that person being Terry Dietz, which is definitely a shame, obviously, after, again, his exit from Cambodia. I would love to see him play again, but it just seems like it's not happening at this point. Again, the people we know were called, obviously, Sari Fields, who is on the season. So, again, biggest no-brainer of them all when they were including multi-time players. And the other person, actually very recent information. It was actually implied that she was not called until very recently. And that person is Daniel De Lorenzo, where, again, this is a name that, again, Survivors Unite seemed to never hear about. Again, she was really on no one's list. Then all of a sudden, she announced herself that she was in the running. and had gotten cut a few weeks back to where, again, I guess Daniel Del Renzo was in the running, which a little bit surprised me just in the sense that, like, obviously there were little rumors that she was in the running for Edge of Extinction. Though, again, it turns out that was, like, a massive meme. To, again, like, her genuinely being in the running here, especially when, like, some other names were not called, is a little surprising. But either way, I ended up getting cut by the end anyway. Next up for Cook Islands, where we know 3 people that were supposedly called. I'm personally surprised that we never heard a single thing about Candace Cody, who never came up. But also, shockingly, we know that Parvati was not called, which I really don't understand why. I find that to be a very strange decision when, like, supposedly other winners were called. But again, Survivors Unite said that she was not called. Parvati herself has said that she's not called, where, again, it makes me really wonder why she wasn't called. But again, the people that were called here, again, first up, someone that, again, was very much in the room mill, Jonathan Penner, who, again, we know was cut relatively late into the process. Would have been cool to see him back, though at the same time, I'm not shocked that he didn't make the cut. And again, sadly, it's a spot where this is probably his last opportunity. They're saying he's going to be in his late 60s by the time Survivor 60. But Penner's someone that, like, seemed to be in the running for a while. Again, my current prediction is that I do think he was on the cast at a point, only to be kicked off once Coach eventually said yes. So again, I'll detail the Coach of it all when we get to the rumor video. But again, it does seem like Penner's someone that might have been on the cast at a point, though ultimately did get cut by the end. Obviously, the person that is on the season itself is Ozzy, and again, we know he's on, so again, not shocking that they would go for Ozzy when they were going for bigger names. And the last person that we heard got called, again, from Survivors Unite, is Yule, who I'm inclined to think he turned down. Again, I've always been in the spot post Winners at War where I didn't take him at face value when he said that he would not play again unless it was like a charity season. Yeah, again, Yule was someone that was on Survivors Unite's list as someone that got called. We never heard about Yule at any point outside that, to where again, I'm inclined to think that likely means he declined, though again, it's just a spot where we don't have as much information on him outside of the fact that he was supposedly called. Next for Survivor Fiji, and we only know about one player that was called for Survivor Fiji. And it's unshockingly the winner of the season. We got Earl. And Earl is someone that, again, was called. Survivors Unite said that they were called. Redmond seemingly heard about Earl at a point and then didn't again, which to me implies a spot where I think Earl got called and likely declined. And we have more proof towards this more recently, where he did post that he's actually filming a movie. And again, I am inclined to think that Earl likely turned down Survivor 50 for this movie. Now again, at the end of the day, would he have made the cut anyway? I don't know, but again, I am inclined to think Earl probably turned down the opportunity to begin with. Next, moving on to Survivor China, which is where, again, we get some disputes here once again. But again, we have 2 people that were supposedly called. An interesting aspect of Survivor China, though, is that Survivors Unite seem to be very confident that only one person was called, the person that we'll talk about first here. That has been disproven recently. Through that, again, it seems like someone like Todd Herzog was not called. His name never came up. James Clement is a name that never came up. PG is someone that never came up. But the person that did very much come up is Amanda Kimmel. And Amanda is this interesting case as she was on the cast. She was literally on the cast, literally just days before the cast got leaked, had her tickets booked, and then all of a sudden she dropped out. Don't know what happened, but again, she literally was on the cast at a point. Supposedly, though, according to Survivors Unite, she was someone that was not called until very late into the process, literally until March, which is when the cast was finalized. Where again, it seems like Amanda was a CBS pick, part of when CBS pushed for bigger names. Again, she was not part of the initial batch of calls back in August, but again, she was on the cast and dropped out to be replaced with someone that we'll talk about later. But again, Survivors Unite talked very confidently that Amanda was the only call, only for it to be revealed recently that Courtney Yates also got the call and did say yes, only to eventually get cut, which is again kind of expected. But again, Courtney's someone that I'm kind of surprised they even called her. I did not think that they would actually call her, which again, good for her that they called her. But ultimately, again, this does obviously make it a bit shaky Survivors Unite information on Survivor China, where for all we know, Todd was called, James Clement was called at this point. Who knows? But again, it did seem like at a point though that Amanda was the only call. But now, of Courtney having been in the running, that kind of shakes things up a bit. So moving on to Micronesia, where really only one name ever came up, and that was from very vague information, though again, there's never a mention of someone like Eric Reichenbach. But again, Natalie Bolton's name did come up, mind you, very late into the process, where supposedly what happened is that the Drop Your Buffs podcast implied a seismic surprise that was coming to Survivor 50, which I think we know what that is now. But it was seemingly at that point that sources started digging into what they knew, and one of the names that came from that was Natalie Bolton. Now, at the end of the day, it seems like she was at least called. We don't know how close she got, where again, a lot of the speculation turned into like, oh, she's the replacement for Amanda, when again, that was never proven. Or it was just simply rumored that she got called. So again, I would not be opposed to Natalie Bolton coming back, but again, I don't know how close that ever was to actually happening. And with that, we then move on to Survivor Gabon, where I don't think anyone for Survivor Gabon was called. Survivors Unite has said no one for Survivor Gabon was called. Kenny has confirmed himself that he was not called. And Corinne has confirmed that she was not called. Again, I don't know who they would call from Survivor Gabon at this point. Or again, don't think anyone was ever in the running. Next up for Tocantins. And Tocantins is another one where, again, there's some rocky information, though we do know of 3 people that were supposedly called. But again, no mention of someone like a JT. I know Aaron Lobdale is a name that was coming up, but again, never by any official source. Same thing with Taj. So the people that, again, were named by more official sources. You got Tyson, who supposedly declined. Again, Tyson was like a part of that set of names. That includes Sandra of people that were called, though it seems like Tyson likely declined the opportunity. Obviously, we got the person that is on the season in Coach, which, again, very weird story with Coach, where supposedly he told production that he would call them if he wanted to be on, and eventually did, like, relatively late into the process, which, again, is why I personally think he probably took Jonathan Penner's spot. But, again, Coach is someone that, not a shocker, they would want him. I mean, we know that he's been asked multiple times in the past for things like Edge of Extinction and 40, to where, again, him finally being on 50 here, not a shocker. And the last person that we're going to talk about, again, is, again, a bit of a rocky one, considering, again, very vague information. This is supposedly someone that Redmond heard at a point, later deconfirmed, seemingly thinking it was bad info. But Survivors Unite still had this person on their list of calls, and that person is Stephen Fishback. And, again, I'm inclined to think that if Stephen Fishback did get called, he declined. Again, he's been saying for a while that he does not want to play again. So, again, I think he turned it down if he did get called. But again, I'm not entirely sure how good this info was to begin with. Though, again, this is definitely one of the rockier names I'm mentioning here, but at least it's someone that, again, was rumored to have been called at a point. Next up for Samoa. And, again, based on Survivors Unite, supposedly no one for Samoa is called. Obviously, the big name would be Russell, who, again, is pretty much confirmed to have not been called. Again, you wouldn't expect them to do that. Again, you wouldn't expect them to call him anyway. Outside of that, again, you have people like Laura Morat, Russell Swan, I guess Monica, but again, people that have returned to pass, but again, never seems like any of their names ever came up. Next, moving on to Nicaragua, and sadly, similar thing. And Survivors Unite said that they never heard any Nicaragua people. No Nicaragua names really came up the entire time. Again, we know for sure someone like Neanka was not called. Chase Rice confirmed himself that he was not called. Never heard a rumbling of Brenda or Marty or Holly Hoffman from any reliable sources. Where, again, I'm just inclined no one from Nicaragua got called. Except for Redemption Island, where we have 3 people that were supposedly called here. I will briefly mention that Philip was someone that was very much talked about, which, again, I'll tell that story in the rumor mill video. But again, there's no actual proof to the fact that he was actually called or not at any point. The people that we know were called, first up, Francesca, which is really funny. That, again, Corinne on her podcast did say that Francesca was called. And it seems like Francesca did get called and turned him down, which is not like she would make the cut anyway. But again, she was someone that was at least in the running. Andrea Belke also has confirmed more recently that she was also called, and did not fully specify if she actually turned it down or not, but did say that she was happy that she did not end up on the cast, which either way doesn't seem like a spot where she was particularly excited to play Survivor again. And something that we got confirmation a while back is that Natalie Tenorelli was called and got cut, which is kind of humorous, since that I never would expect to see Natalie Tenorelli in the running again. And again, I know a lot of people were outraged when she did announce that she got cut, because it was literally right after the Jesse and Carolyn cuts. Though the reality is that I think they just told the people that were cut that they were cut at that point. I don't think that's really indicative of Natalie Tenorelli being just as close to being on the cast as Carolyn or Jesse, especially considering we know that they narrowed down the list over time. Again, I think this is simply a spot where they called everyone back in August and then just told all the people that were for sure cut that they were cut at the end of March in one big batch, to where, again, it doesn't really tell us much about how close Natalie Tenorelli was, but and she was called at least. Next up, moving on to South Pacific, where this is a spot where we just simply don't have any information on South Pacific newbies, where, again, no one's name really came up. It's not really a spot where we have like someone like Survivors Unite saying no Pacific got called like we did with some of those previous seasons, but it's just a season that just never came up. Again, I'm inclined to think someone like Cochran obviously got called and likely turned him down, but again, there's really no proof to anything here. Next, moving on to One World, and similar thing, no confirmed names from Survivor One World from a reliable source, and we do know, like, Troy Zan supposedly did not get called per Survivors Unite, but really outside that, no name got mentioned outside of Jonas. Full clarification here. I don't know how real this is not from Redmond or Survivors Unite. This came from a Survivor Sucks poster, which we'll just call him BHW right now, who is a very unreliable source. However, they did have correct sources at a point, as, again, many of the names on their list ended up being on Redmond's list, with Redmond finding out about them a month later. So, again, they clearly had correct information at a point. I don't know if the Jonas name is correct, especially considering I believe the story about Jonas is that his name was like floating around at recent charity events, in a spot where we have a person later on the list that was also a name floated around that has now been confirmed to not have got called. So, again, I'm inclined to think this information is probably not reliable, but again, it is a name that did come up from someone that did have information at a point. So again, I'll at least mention him here. Next, for Survivor Philippines, where we got 2 people that were mentioned along the way. Again, two people that, again, I think most people know about at this point. Abby Maria is someone that has been very vocal about the fact that she got cut. Seemingly was not explicitly told she wasn't on, which is very strange. To the point where I believe Fairplay has said that like he called her up a few days before cast was flying out, and she said that she was finding out on Wednesday when the cast was announced, which is like, there's no way that's gonna happen. But still, it's like a spot where, again, it seems like Abby Maria was someone that was like kind of left on hold for a while. Mind you, again, she knew in the rumor mill that she was cut for a while, to where, again, I don't know if that message didn't get relayed to her, but again, it's still a spot where Abby Maria definitely was called, definitely was in the running, but just simply ultimately was not chosen. Now, the next person would be talking about someone that there is conflicting information on this person. We know he was called, don't know exactly what happened with him. That person's Malcolm. And Malcolm's a person that, again, was on Redmond's list of rumored calls. Survivors Unite also has said that he was called. However, Redmond does not know what happened with Malcolm. They never got confirmation if he was cut, if he dropped out, what exactly happened. However, Survivors Unite has claimed that he was cut. That he was cut a while back at this point. And again, it's a spot where, again, considering how rocky some of the other Survivors Unite information seems to be at this point, I'm not entirely sure if I'm 100% confident that he was cut, though I do think it would make sense if they cut him for Ozzy. I just didn't feel like they needed both, even though they had both on Game Changers. But again, it's a spot where this is pure speculation. We just simply do not know. He was for sure called, just, again, don't really know what happened with him. Next, moving on to fans from Caramoan, where I don't think a single person from Caramoan was called. Again, it's a similar spot to like South Pacific, where it wasn't explicitly said no one from Caramoan is on, but it is a spot where, again, just no name came up, and I would be inclined to think no one was called here. Now for Blood vs. Water, and we really only have one name come up from Blood vs. Water, which is pretty surprising, and people that I thought could have been at least called, again, people like Brad Culpepper, Hayden, again, their names never came up. The one name that we heard come up at a point is Sierra Easton, and again, this is from only Survivors Unite. None of the other reputable sources ever said Sierra's name, which is very strange, but again, I'm inclined to think Sierra got called. It makes sense based on the caliber of people that were called that she would get called, though it does seem like she was likely cut along the way. Again, we just don't have the full information on her. Next, I'm moving on to Cagayan. Now, there were some people from Cagayan that are implied to have not been called. I mean, Wu is someone that Redmond consistently denied that he was called, but again, too far, I don't know if that was really based on him actually knowing he wasn't called, or if that was just him feeling confident knowing he was not called, or if that was just him being confident that Wu would not be called. But also Cass is in a similar spot where it doesn't seem like Cass was called. And Bryce is someone that, again, has some conflicting messages, where there were people in the Sucks community that were claiming that Bryce was called. However, Bryce himself has said that he was not called. And again, in this spot, I would more so believe Bryce, as again, why would he lie about not being called? But again, we got 4 people from Survivor Cagayan that were supposedly called. First up, we got Tasha Fox, who is someone that I personally thought was the person that Redmond is referring to as the Cagayan player for a while. Turns out it was not. It was a certain other person we're about to be talking about. However, Survivors Unite has since then confirmed that Tasha was called, to where, again, Tasha was called, but I would assume just a cut along the way. Also, one of the more surprising people called from Survivors Unite's information is Trish, which, again, good for Trish if she did get called. Again, someone that I was not expecting to get called, but again, is at least a name that Survivors Unite heard, so again, good on her. Also, obviously, a name that everyone knows about, I feel like, Spencer, aka Raymond, who again was called, said yes, got cut back in March, was very vocal about him getting cut, to where, again, kind of just open information there. And the last name, again, another one of these on that list of winners from Survivors Unite, they did mention Tony had gotten called, but it was not implied that he declined. Tony was kind of lumped in with Sandra in that spot of like that he was called but never entered the process. And again, I personally do not think Tony would say no based on his recent interviews, to where I'm inclined to think that he said yes, and then they just decided to not, again, go with these like big legends on this season. But again, we don't fully know at this point. Next up for San Juan del Sur, which sadly we never heard a single San Juan del Sur name come up along the way. We know for sure people that were not called, from the likes of Kelly Wentworth, who has seemingly burned her relationship production in the years since, to where, again, she was not called. Natalie Anderson also confirmed that she was not called, which is a little bit surprising to me. Again, Jeremy's name just never came up. Again, outside of Jeremy, I would be pretty surprised to hear about someone from San Juan del Sur getting called at this point. Next up for Survivor Worlds Apart, and same thing. No one from World Apart ever got named. Now, we got a couple people that were implied to have not got called, like Joe Englam was someone that Survivors Unite think was not called, and Mike Holloway is someone that, again, also just never came up, but also, again, seemingly burned his relationship production. And again, it was also implied that they don't think he got called, to where, again, another spot where it doesn't seem like anyone from Worlds Apart got called, which is not particularly shocking at this point. But with that, we're going to move on to Co-Wrong, where we do have 4 people that supposedly got called from Co-Wrong. And along with that, we also got one person that has confirmed that they did not get called, which is Michelle Fitzgerald, the winner, which, again, a little surprising, though, considering how prominent she is on the challenge. Maybe that stirred them away from her, even though, again, they also called people from other shows. But ultimately, again, Michelle seemed to be someone that was not called. But people that were called, first up, one of the bigger shockers that they remembered this person, Julia Sokolowski, which again, good for Julia Sokolowski. The fact that she was still being called like a good 10 years after her season. And I do think she has an interesting returning storyline, but again, she's someone that I did not expect to be in the running. And again, we'll get it in the rumor mill video, but again, she was someone that was talked about for a while, but ultimately do not expect her to be that close to making it on. Also, Sydney Gillen was someone that was in the rumor mill for a while, and we have gotten confirmation more recently from her herself that she did get cut, which is, again, obviously massive shame there. Would have been great to see her, but I do wonder for times past. Another name that came up was Tai Trang, who was someone that I was pretty convinced that Tai was going to be on the cast for a good chunk of the rumor mill. Though it turns out from Redmond, I believe his name was only heard vaguely once and then never again. Survivors Unite has claimed that Tai was someone that was called and then cut and then called back. To where, again, to me, I thought he would be someone like an alternate or something, but ultimately, no. Ty's name just never came up again. So again, I'm inclined to think he probably just got cut along the way. And obviously, the last person to mention here is the person that's on the season. We got Aubrey Bracco, where Aubrey's in this weird spot here, where Aubrey was someone that was not really rumored at all. I mean, we had confirmation for a while that Redmond had not heard about Aubrey. Her name just never came up, and then all of a sudden, she's on the cast, which... If you do not know, the story here is that she replaced Amanda. Again, Amanda dropped out a week or so before the cast flew out. Aubrey was that replacement, which, again, I think you can qualm with why Aubrey, but still, I mean, Aubrey seemed to be a last-second addition here. Mind you, she was definitely in the process before that. Again, there's no way that they just called Aubrey out of the blue to do this when they had all these other names. She clearly was someone that was called back when all the other calls happened, was in the process, and was probably a late cut, and just someone that we just never heard about until the point where she was actually on the cast. Next, move on to Millennials Gen X, where somehow no one from Millennials Gen X ever came up, which is pretty shocking to me. Especially because Jeff just recently called it one of his favorite seasons. Again, the fact that just no one's name came up from this season, just mind-blowing. And no mention of David Wright, who I assume got called, but again, never came up. Jay Starrett, a name that, again, never got confirmed to have been called. Zeke, same thing. Michaela, Mari Takahashi got called for 40, so who knows? But again, just no one got brought up along the way, which is pretty surprising considering it's one of Jeff's favorite seasons. But yeah, just no one rumored from Millennials Gen X here. Next up for HHH, where we only have 2 names here that we heard got called. Again, would not shock me if someone like Ben Driebergen got called. But really, HHH is a season that obviously is far enough back to where I don't know how top priority a lot of these people are. But again, the people that were called, this is another one that was a very vague name. Redmond supposedly heard very early on in the process, but we got Devin Pinto, where again, don't know what happened with him. He could have declined for all we know. But again, it's at least a name that was brought up at a point, a name that Redmond had heard. But again, simply a name that just never was ever brought up again. And obviously the other name is the person that's on the season, which is Chrissy Hopbeck, who again has been rumored, was rumored for a while. And I am personally surprised she ultimately made the cut. But again, not a shocker that she was someone that was called to begin with. Next up from Ghost Island, for a while, there was no one from Ghost Island rumored at all. Literally no one's name ever came up until literally a few days ago at the time of this recording, where we finally got confirmation of one person from Ghost Island. But again, surprising, someone like Donathan was never in the rumor mill. Wendell was someone that never came up, but the person that we know got called now and was cut, that person's Dominic, which again, not shocking that Dominic was in the running, more so shocking the fact that Dominic's name just never came up in the rumor mill at all. But again, we did get confirmation from Dominic himself that yes, he was in the running and he did get cut, which again, not shocking that he was in the running, though obviously probably shocking to a lot of people that he got cut. But sadly, if I were to guess, I would say someone like Joe probably took his spot. Next up for David vs. Goliath, where we know 5 people got called for David vs. Goliath. Obviously, 3 of them ended up on the cast. The only person we have confirmation that did not get called was Natalie Cole, which is obviously a shame considering I believe she was called for 40. But again, she confirmed herself that she was not called along the way. But again, the people that were called, first up, we got Gabby Petscuzzi, who is, again, someone that was rumored to have been called for a while. Got cut along the way, probably at the same time Davey did back in March, to where, again, not shocking to me that she got called. I mean, she's someone that is mentioned quite often in the modern day as a player you want to play the most and someone that just didn't make the cuts. Obviously, we know Christian is on the cast, who, again, massive character from the time, not a shocker. He got called. Obviously, another one of the bigger cuts that people are talking about, we got Davey Rickenbacker, which, again, such a shame, considering I would have loved to see him back. I personally never thought he would actually make the cut, though. It was someone that was rumored and sadly did get cut along the way. And then, obviously, we got the 2 other people that were on the cast, Angelina. Again, not shocking. Again, Jeff was very pro Angelina at the time. The question was just, did too much time pass? But it clearly didn't, so Angelina's on. And again, Mike White is on. But where, as I mentioned with Natalie Bolton, his name was not rumored for a while. It really was the Drop Your Buffs podcast that kind of exposed him being on the cast, with, again, him seemingly being the seismic surprise that they were talking about. So, to be fair, it should have been kind of obvious that they would at least reach out to Mike White, considering how big of a get he would be for the season. But then we move on to Edge of Extinction, where really the only confirmed call from Edge of Extinction is the person that ends up on the cast. Yeah, we do have some people that were confirmed to not have been called, people that I would have loved to see called, like Lauren O'Connell, Victoria, who again, sadly don't look like they were called. But the person that was called was obviously Rick Devens on the cast, was kind of a no-brainer. Though another one that kind of escaped the rumor mill for almost the entirety of it. I mean, he really did not come up until literally a week before the cast was leaked, to where Kind of surprising he was able to escape all that for so long, but ultimately someone that was kind of a no-brainer to end up being on the cast. Next up for IOI, and IOI is a spot here where we have no confirmed calls, as in we don't know the people themselves. However, we do have information about IOI in a spot where no reputable source has heard of an IOI name, Redmond, or Survivors Unite. However, again, going back to BHW's list, on his list was Lauren Ashley Beck a while back, until we got more recently confirmation that she was not called, which again is part of why those sort of people are, again, definitely big question marks at this point. But again, Lauren Ashley Beck supposedly was not called. However, in that, Lauren also did confirm that 2 people from IOI did get called. The question is, who are those people? Because at the time of this recording, we do not know. Again, I'm inclined to think one of them is Elaine. But again, I'm not entirely sure who the other person is. It could, where I could see it being Krishma, Nora. Janet's name was actually one that was floating around early on. I believe at the time it was confirmed that she was not called. But even that, I don't know if that was necessarily reliable. So again, there's a lot of question marks here around IOI, but it does seem like 2 people from IOI were called. It's just that I personally do not know who those people are at this point. And with that, we then move on to the new era, where here we're starting it off with Survivor 41, where there are 4 people that were rumored to have been called along the way, with not that much information outside that. Again, like Tiffany and Evie's names are floated around, but not by a reliable source. Liana was a name that I thought could have been in the running early on, but it turns out that wasn't the case. Again, Ricard is a name that I think people were expecting to be called, but I was not expecting to be called. But either way, the people that were supposedly called here, first up, the biggest shocker of the bunch, we got Nasir, which I was not expecting Nasir to be on Redmond's list. And again, I'll talk about it when I get to the rumor mill video. But again, there was never a point where I was assuming Nasir was someone in the rumor mill. But again, Nasir was a name that Redmond heard very early on, and a name that he knows for sure was called, though ultimately a name that obviously probably just got cut along the way. Also, one of the biggest names from the season, I am going to mention Shan. Now, Shan is, again, another one of these names that is not particularly reliable. Redmond has heard her name. She is on his rumored called list, but we simply do not know what happened beyond that. But again, it's simply just a rumor. But again, we just simply don't have full information on whether or not she was called or not. But it does seem like there was at least information at a point that seemed to point to the fact that she was at least contacted. And with that, then move on to a name that shocked me was not on Redmond's list initially, and that person's Xander. And again, for the longest time, I thought Xander was the biggest lock from 41 to be on Redmond's list, considering he had 3 people. However, it turns out Xander was not one of those people. However, in the time since, obviously, other sources have said Xander's name. Survivors Unite was very confident Xander was in the running, and supposedly there was talk about how he's pre-gaming, and again, there was even like speculation that he would be the alternate because of that. However, again, obviously nothing really came of that, but again, Xander was at least called and in the running at a point seemingly. Would not be shocked if he made it like relatively deep into the process if he actually was pre-gaming, but still a name that, again, did not seem to actually come up from a reliable source until relatively late into the process, in a spot where I just assumed he was one of the names called early on. But also the other name, not as big of a shocker to me. We got Deshaun, which might be a shocker to some people, but again, I feel like Deshaun is someone that was implied by like multiple sources early on. Redmond talking about having new era runners up on his list early on, or again, Deshaun being called, not shocking here, but also another one that, again, I don't think was particularly close to making the cut. Next, I'm moving on to 442, where here I do have 6 people to talk about, which is funny considering only one of them made the cut. And even then, to be fair, 2 of these are from more unreliable sources. But someone that it doesn't seem like they were called is Drea, who is someone that, again, I thought production came out of 42 liking Drea. Turns out maybe that isn't the case. And Redmond seemed to be pretty down the idea that they would call Drea, to where, again, not looking like Drea was called. But the people that, again, were in the rumor mill, we got Tori. Now, again, Tori is one of these names from BHW's list, where this was never confirmed from a more reliable source. But again, considering they did have some reliable information, I'll at least mention her. I don't know if this is true, but just, again, a name that was in the room at a point, but again, for sure got cut by the end. A more reliable name, one that we know for sure was called and cut. We got Omer. And again, would have loved to see Omer on. Though, I'll be honest, I was actually kind of surprised that he was in the running personally, as I never really got the sense they loved Omer. But even though he is such an incredible character, but again, he was someone that was also cut at the same time as some of these other big new era names we'll later talk about. Another name from BHW's list that, again, not 100% confirmed, but we'll at least mention Lindsay Delosowicz, who, again, they said was called. Don't know if that's true. Either way, assumingly got cut along the way. So, again, we'll at least mention her. Obviously, Jonathan is on the cast, and again, was kind of a no-brainer to be in the running for most of it. Again, I would have been mind-blown if he was not at least contacted. So, again, that was pretty obvious. Also mentioned Mike Turner, who is someone that is actually not even on Redmond's like confirmed calls list. He's on his rumored calls list, but it's been said since that Mike Turner was one of these people that got cut a few weeks before the cast was officially announced, where, again, it seems like he was someone that was like kind of dangling onto the cast, kind of like a Dominic and a Penner, where they didn't like cut him very early on, but again, eventually did get the cut. And the last person to mention here, someone that was cut seemingly last second, is Marianne. In a spot where I am mind blown, Marianne did not make the season. Again, Marianne is someone that I just assume would be a lock had winners been available. And again, when we eventually got word that a female winner was on the cast, I just assumed it was Marianne, and it turns out it wasn't. Again, it seems like Marianne was on the cast at a point, seemingly got cut last second for a 49 player, which again is pretty mind blowing they would do that. But again, Marianne was very deep into the process, though sadly did get cut by the end. Next, I'm moving on to 43, and 43 is another one of these spots where we have some conflicting information. I do have two people that were mentioned in the rumor mill. One is a confirmed cut, the other one a little bit more questionable, but I mean, let's just get into the questionable one right away. We got Carla. Carla is someone that, again, was on Redmond's rumored call list, aka he just heard that she was called at a point. However, I know there were reports about Sammy from 43 having said that Jesse was the only 43 player to get called. Again, not entirely sure what is true. I would be inclined to think Carla would at least get a call along the way, but to be fair, I would have thought that about Cody, who is someone that also never came up in the rumor mill. But again, Carla's name was at least out there at a point, so again, I'll at least mention her here. But obviously the person that we know for sure was called and cut is Jesse, who again was cut back at the end of March, confirmed himself over and over and over again, to where, again, Jesse was for sure in the running and eventually got cut, which is not particularly great for his returning chances for down the road. And next, I'm moving on to 44, where I am shocked we did not hear more names from 44. We only heard 2 names the entire time, which, considering production seemed to love 44 at the time, I assume other people had to have been called. It's just that we have not heard about them. Again, the fact that Jam Jam's name never came up at any point. I would expect Heidi to have been someone that got called by the way that Jeff was talking about her in a recent interview. But again, her name never came up. Carson is someone that, again, another one like Drea, that was kind of implied to have not gotten called due to how production feels about him now. But Franny is someone I'm surprised never got mentioned. Again, just a cast that, again, I just assume people would be in the running from this season. Just people never came up. But again, the people that did, someone that wasn't even from a reliable source, they confirmed to themselves that they got cut. That person's Lauren Harp, who, again, confirmed that they got called and cut at the same time as Jesse and the next person we'll be talking about, to where, again, she was in the running but did not make it on. And also, the biggest shock of them all, we got Carolyn, where I still can't believe that Carolyn got cut. Again, it is an insane decision. Like, I get if they were going to stick true to the concept of we don't want these one-time players that go on other shows, but again, you literally put Dee on the season anyway. And I get that obviously the challenge is owned by Paramount and the Traders isn't, but still, it's still a spot where it is a mind-boggling decision to not put Carolyn on the cast. Especially when it's a spot where, like, she supposedly was not called when all the other calls went out. They supposedly were upset at her initially and then decided to let that go and call her in November, again, a few months after everyone else was called, which you would assume that they're doing that because they're just like, screw it, we'll look past it, we're going to put her on. And then, no, they just got her anyway, to where, again, all this is just very strange. But again, confirmed that she is someone that was eventually called and eventually cut. Next, I'm moving on to 45, where we actually do have a lot of rumored names. I believe we have 7. However, again, some of these are, again, more flaky, but we do have some confirmed not calls. Again, Sifu is someone that confirmed he wasn't called, which not shocking. But also Jake O'Kane, a while back, claimed that he was not called. Mind you, this was back when the cast was not finalized. So again, who knows if he was lying or not. But again, and he at least implied at a point that he was not called. But people that were called. First up, we got Sabaya. And Sabaya is someone that, again, was cut alongside, again, Jesse and Carolyn and Omer, like, around that time. Yeah, it felt like her name was, like, still floating around the room mill for a while, especially when we knew that a 45 female was on the cast, and it seemed like a lot of people just thought that was Sabaya for some reason. But, again, Sabaya was definitely in the running. I think they very much like Sabaya. Not shocking she was called. She's a person that, again, I don't think was that close to actually making it on to 50, though, again, would not be shocked to see her back in the running if there is a second chance season in the next few years. But next up, someone that is, again, a very recent addition to this list. That person's Caleb, who is someone that, again, his name just never came up in the rumor mill the entire time. However, during RHAP's, like, 50 Snubs podcast, Redmond in the comments claimed that Caleb was called and cut in a spot where, again, his name just never came up outside that, to where, again, seems like Caleb was called, and again, you would assume Caleb was called. Again, I would have been mind blown if he was not called, but again, seems like he was genuinely cut just along the way. Next up, another name that, again, not confirmed at all. This is another name from BHW's list. We do have Kelly Nalbandian, who, again, I would expect got called. I mean, she was someone that production seemed to love at the time. Jeff, even more recently, still mentioned her blindside as one of the best blindsides in Survivor history, to where, again, she's still someone that, again, I expect got called, but probably cut along the way. Obviously, beyond that, we got, again, someone that is confirmed to be on the season, and Emily Flippin, which, again, not shocking to see was called. Again, I thought she was one of the biggest locks on the board to be called. Shocking that she said yes, considering she had been saying for forever that she would not play again. And obviously she could have changed her mind, though I could also see a world where she was just lying the entire time because Emily Flippin is a liar. But again, who knows? Drew Basile is someone that we know was called and cut. He confirmed that himself, where again, he was cut alongside, again, the Jesse Carolyns of the world. Again, seemed like Jeff loved them at the time, to where, again, kind of a no-brainer to at least get called, but ultimately, I would assume they went with someone like Christian over him. Now, next up, another name on BHW's list. We do have Austin, who, again, would not shock me. I would expect Austin to get called. Now, obviously, there were, again, the question marks around Austin since that he is dating Jeff Probst's niece, and would that lead to issues if he was on the cast? Though, ultimately, again, I think Austin's someone that was a fan favorite at the time. Kind of is like the more modern, like Ozzy Malcolm style player, where again, I think Austin is someone that they would have considered, though ultimately he did not seem to make the cut. And obviously, last person for 45 is the person on the season. We got D, who, again, I'm not shocked that she got called. I am shocked that she's on the season, considering the challenge of it all. The fact that she was literally filming the challenge when the cast got finalized, which is insane. But again, she's here. Not shocking. She was at least in the running. And with that, we then move on to 46, where we do have 7 names from 46 that supposedly got called, which I'm assuming is probably most of the calls that went out for this season. Though, again, we never heard about Kenzie, who's someone that has recently said that she would play again. So again, who knows if she got contacted? We don't know what really happened. Venus, where that was a person that I would suspect probably wasn't called, but there was a point where we thought maybe she was, but ultimately the clues turned out to be pointing towards Shan instead, where ultimately, again, I would not be shocked if Venus wasn't called, even though, again, a lot of people were expecting her somewhat in the running, but ultimately, again, I would lean towards her probably not by the end. Banu is another person I think people were expecting to get called, yet never heard his name from any source. But again, people that were claimed to be called, we got Jelinski, which again, this is from himself. He has said that he got called. Again, no sources have really heard his name. But again, would not be that shocked considering how recent he is, though someone that, again, would not have expected to make the cut, obviously. Also, another person that has confirmed himself that he was called is Tevin, where, again, Tevin's someone that Jeff Probst at the time said that he would love a Tevin on every season, where, again, I'm not shocked that he got called, though ultimately someone that, again, doesn't seem like he would make the cut. Last person I'm going to be mentioning here from BHW's list is Hunter McKnight, who is someone that, again, was speculated to have gotten called. Again, definitely don't fully know how true it is, but also would not be shocked. It would make sense. He is of an archetype that, again, they typically would like. Again, Hunter being called would not be that big of a shocker. But now we're getting to people that are on the season. We got Tiffany, who was shocking a little bit that she ended up on the cast, as she previously said that she was not called, which, to be fair, should have been very sus to begin with, as, again, Tiffany is someone that Probst loved. It would be shocking if she was not called, but again, she claimed she was not called. And at the time, I took that at face value, but obviously, in retrospect, I realized that was really dumb to do that. But again, she's on the cast. Not shocking that she would be in contention. I even said back in my Guide to Every Player's Returning Chances video that I thought she would make the cut, and again, ultimately, she did. Q, obviously one of the biggest locks on the board. There was no way they were going to not call Q. Now Q, again, at a point, claimed that he turned it down, which I doubt that's the case. But again, never a doubt that they would call him. The last cut from 46 ends up being Maria, who is someone that, again, like also did not really come up until very recently. Yeah, again, supposedly she was in the running, supposedly got cut. Really, the only way I saw Maria actually making the cast was if she was there with Charlie, but ultimately, again, not super surprised she didn't make it on. And obviously, we got to mention Charlie, who again is on, and that wasn't that shocking. It was before all this like New Era Massacre talk. It felt kind of obvious Charlie was going to be on, and again, him ultimately making the cut is not shocking. And with that, we then move on to 47, where we know of 4 people that were called. Shockingly, one of them not being Rachel Lamont, where I genuinely cannot believe this, that Rachel Lamont was not called in a spot where, again, obviously I've been lowish on Rachel Lamont's game, and again, I don't find her to be the most riveting TV character, but the fact that she was not called at all for Survivor 50 is insanity. Where literally when we heard about 2 female winners being in the running for 50, my first instinct was Marianne and Rachel, and it's funny that we're in a spot where neither of them are on, but still, it's like a spot where, again, I think Rachel snubbed here is pretty mind-blowing. But again, the people that were supposedly were called and cut, we got Rome, who I think a lot of people are like really clowning Rome, like thinking that he made up the fact that he was cut, but no, Redmond has confirmed himself. Yeah, Rome was cut. And even if this is a world where Rome would not be called because of the boot list stuff, the calls went out in August before the season even started. So again, that would not play a factor at all. He would have been called anyway. So again, I think Rome is someone that definitely was called, but obviously was cut by the end. Also have to mention Andy. Andy is someone that was on the cast for a while, seemingly. Again, another one like Marianne, supposedly was the last second cut for a 49 person. Though another one that, again, kind of escaped the rumor mill for a decent chunk of it. But again, did pop up at the end, but again, sadly, seemed to have been on our radars just to be instantly cut right after that. which again is shocking considering how much Jeff seemed to love Andy at the time. Anyway, obviously confirmed Genevieve is on the cast. A lot of people were like really speculating over like thinking that she would turn it down, which I know she has like claimed that she didn't want to play Survivor on TV again, but again, I always felt like that was her lying and pretending that she wouldn't come back. But again, Genevieve's back. Not shocking she'd be in the running. A little bit surprised that she was picked over certain other New Era people and is the only 47 rep, but again, not shocking that she's on the cast on paper. And finally, last person that we heard got called is Sam Phelan, who we know was cut again back when the Carolyn and Jesse cuts happen. Though someone that, again, I would not be shocked if we do see Sam back at some point down the road, especially if there's a returning season in the next few seasons. I do feel like Sam is someone that I could definitely see being relatively high on their boards, but ultimately not in this cast. With that, we then move on to 48. Where we only have 4 confirmed people called, obviously 3 of them on the season. Now, again, this is pure speculation, but again, I would personally assume that Eva was called and likely turned it down, as she has said recently that she would not be able to play again until she finishes her PhD. Again, I just cannot imagine where they didn't call Eva, considering how much they just love the Joe and Eva storyline. So again, I'm inclined to think that's what happened, but again, that's full speculation. Same thing goes with people like Mitch, Shauheen, David, even Thomas, even Stephanie. Again, all these people, again, Jeff is very much implied, very much liking, to where again, I would not be shocked if any of those people got called, but again, that is not confirmed in the slightest. But again, the people that we know were called. The only person of those people that were cut is Say. And Say, someone that we know was in the running. At a point, seemed like she was going to be on the cast, yet again, ultimately was cut. Again, don't know the full story here, but again, she definitely was someone called and was definitely in the running at a point. And then obviously we got the people on the cast itself. We got Camilla, who, again, a little shocking that she made it on over Marianne, but still, again, I think Camilla is someone that they seem to like. They liked her story. They liked her growth arc. They're, again, not shocked that she got called. Joe is someone that was like the biggest lock on the board for the longest period of time. Like for a while, we only knew about 148 male that was on the cast. And again, it felt like that was obviously Joe. Especially now that he has not won. Again, it just made it even more obvious that he would be on. And then we got Kyle, who did win and is still on, which is mind-blowing. But again, Jeff did literally say at the end of the On Fire podcast for the finale that Kyle's going to be a great ambassador for the game, to where that was the point where I was like, okay, I think there's definitely a shot Kyle is on 50, and ultimately that ended up being proven correct. And with that, obviously, we know that there are 249 players on the cast. I know some people are trying to avoid spoilers on that, and because again, I'm just not going to mention them here. There's no real point. Again, there's not really any insight to really be had with them. To where, again, it does seem like Marianne and Andy were cut in favor of them, which, again, take that for what you will. But we do know there is 1 male and 1 female, 49 player on Survivor 50. Again, we obviously don't fully know like who else could have been potentially in the running or what exactly was going on there, but obviously they were late additions to the cast. But again, with that is everyone that has been rumored to have been called from, again, a somewhat reliable source for Survivor 50. Now, obviously, down the road, I'm going to continue to do Survivor 50 content here and there. I do obviously have this big rumor mill video that I want to make that I don't know when that video is actually going to come out. I have to actually make it, and it's probably going to be a big video. But again, it'll be me running through the entire history of the rumors that were out there, and who we knew were in the running, and who we thought were on the cast at specific points. So again, stay tuned for that video down the road. I'm likely going to pre-record my Survivor 50 preseason power ranking, to where, again, I'm assuming I'm probably spoiled by the end. But again, I likely will end up pre-recording that video, and I'll probably be available for members very early. I don't know when I'm actually releasing it. I might not release it until the official preseason starts. We'll see. But again, that'll be a video I probably make at some point in the next couple weeks. Beyond that, I got like my top 10 players of the New Era video and other just typical content you can expect from the channel. For now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.